Hello and welcome to the Midwest Pokemon League. My name is Pyson, coach of the Portland Trailblazers, and I am back with another Draft League video. Today, I want to kind of make a follow-up to an older video on this channel that me and Cal did last year, or at least the beginning section of that video where we talked about our draft priorities. We made a checklist about what's truly important to grab. And the reason for this is because I think this topic is especially important now, seeing as this is our second season with 24 people as opposed to the usual 16. And I feel like between that and the recent, or rather not so recent, point overhaul, there's a lot of different things to discuss regarding draft philosophy and how that's changed, especially for me. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend checking it out first, as I will be referencing to it a lot when discussing those said philosophies and how they've changed and evolved in this new system that we're in. I'll be linking that down below. It's like the first 10 minutes of that 2-hour video, so don't worry about watching it all the way through. All right, without further ado, let's talk about the number one change to my draft philosophy, which is the importance of immunities and resistances as a whole. Now, in the past, I've been very vocal that my number one priority is making sure that you draft a very solid core of Mons, usually within the realm of that type core that I'll touch on momentarily. But I think that in this new system that we're in, where we have 24 battlers and thus teams are going to be significantly weaker as a whole, my new priority nowadays is just to ensure that I have a resist or an immunity to every type, preferably the latter when available, but ideally both. So what does this mean? This means that I am especially valuing the following types, being Steel, Berry, Dark, Ground, Ghost, and non-grounded Pokemon, we can call them. I prefer flying types, but Levitate Mons are generally sufficient. You just have to be a little bit more aware about Mons like Haxorus and Excadrill and what have you. Now, the reason for this is really simple, obviously. You want to make sure that you have counterplay available for the types that those are immune to. Poison, Dragon, Psychic, Electric, Normal, Fighting, and Ghost in that order. It's really important that you have a resist to every type because you want to have a check for all possible team compositions. And I think that's really easy to do, but it's like hard to constantly be keeping track of. It's going to come naturally, right? When you're drafting types, you're going to naturally feel your resistances, you're going to watch out for your weaknesses. But I think that when it comes down to it, I'm just going to be trying to be more cognizant of that in the future because it's way more important to me to make sure that I don't lose to any one Mon. And that's the safest way to do that. All right. Now, circling back to those aforementioned type cores, obviously, everyone kind of knows about the Fairy Steel Dragon core, the Fire Water Grass core. These cores are really just solid because, they cover each other very well offensively and defensively. They're, very well known draft philosophies, and, everyone kind of, has them in mind when they're building. I personally started valuing the core of Dark, Psychic, and Fighting more, particularly when it comes to Pursuit and Future Sight users. As a whole, I think that core is extremely solid to bring in this current system of Mons that we play, because I think those types are way stronger. Now, with all that really being said, I think it's important to kind of state something that I haven't previously stated before, and that is that you cannot feasibly get all three of these cores at the price range of high tier Mons. It's just not doable. Something will have to be sacrificed. So for me, personally, I think it's very important to ensure the core that you do choose to prioritize, 1, gets finished early on, and are 2, all strong picks. I'm going to use some examples from last season. One of my favorites was Devin's Fairy Steel Dragon core, which he got in the first 3 rounds, and it consisted of Enamorus, Iron Treads, and Hydreigon. All of these Mons kind of do different things and fill different roles on the team. And they were very well drafted together. That team did very well. Going on to a different core, Patrick did Fire Water Grass last season. He went Mega Charizard X Ferrothorn, and he managed to even get a steal by late picking the Urshifu Rapid Strike. And again, that's a team that did very well. Nando had a solid Psychic, Dark, and Fighting core, Quackavolt, Meowscarada, and Articuno G. Articuno G, again, a weaker pick, but the way that he played it made sure that he was, getting the future sights, getting the pivots, making sure to really use that speed tier, and thus, even if it was a weaker quote-unquote Psychic type, he played it super well, and it even got moved up this season. Ideally, you really want to make sure you actually finish a strong core, and you want to make sure that all those mons kind of do different things. And you want to do that as early as possible. And then, ideally you're going to round out the rest of your team. You're going to grab your resists, you're going to grab some flex picks, you're going to make sure you get some support, and you're going to want to make sure that everything synergizes well together. So yeah, that's the new draft standard that I'm kind of holding people to this season. I'm going to be consistent with that, or at least I will try to when we do the preseason power rankings when the draft actually happens. But yeah, so just kind of to touch on some other things that I mentioned in that video last year, I think my thoughts on pivoting still remains the same, if not more. I still value it super duper highly. It's so hard to gain momentum under normal circumstances, and pivot moves, strong pivot moves at that, U-turn, Volt Switch, flip turn, future sight, and teleport strategies, that's super strong. It's super hard to counteract that outside of Pursuit mons, and even then the level of Pursuit mons I don't even think are being valued highly enough. That's why I even mentioned it earlier. It's so incredibly important because Draft League is so extremely snowbally if you just build properly, and unless you're planning around being behind, it's really hard to get back into games. Cal mentioned slow and fast pivots last season. I originally was like, it doesn't really matter, you can get one or the other. I think I'm kind of on his side now that you do kind of want to get one of each, at least one slow pivot and at least one fast pivot. It absolutely warps the game and it makes it really hard, and even just the threat of it being there, because everyone's going to overpredict around pivoting. It's just a natural occurrence in the game. I mentioned hazards last season, and I want to just clarify, Stealth Rock's webs, obviously everyone kind of has those in mind. I personally have a new appreciation for spikes and T-spikes. I think heavy duty boots have kind of ruined the utility of Stealth Rocks, and that item is so much more rare for things that aren't affected strongly by rocks. And you can really, really just go ham. One of my favorite games, I think it was 2 seasons ago when Swan had the Electric Terrain team, and I just set up T-spikes with Iron Moth and he couldn't do anything for the rest of the game, and it was just such an easy victory for my team. And that isn't to say that rocks are useless, by the way, because, the knowledge of heavy duty boots is so incredibly valuable, and it just takes out like the guessing game, right? But it is kind of a mental warfare game in team prep. It's just something that I keep in mind personally. I am valuing spikes a little more. I am valuing T-spikes a little more. And then kind of going back to webs, I think that they're also a little overhyped because, you see webs on the enemy team, they're coming. Most teams aren't designed without webs in mind. Most teams are designed like, I'm going to bring my webber most weeks, It's just kind of easy to predict and easy to prep for. And Lord knows, I've won so many games off the back of a Araquanid and a Rabambi, but it's easy to know it's coming. So I think that it's just important to kind of try to not have your team rely so heavily on that. On another note, I think that wall breakers are easily some of the best mons in the game right now. It's so hard to get consistent switches into them. That's why I'm valuing those resistances and immunities more highly. 2 good wall breakers, ideally physically in special split, they just wreak havoc on every single team. Swan, for all that we made fun of him last season, that Hoopa U and Blacephalon core was unstoppable when it got going. I think with the weaker teams, walls themselves are inherently more valuable because anything that can sponge hits and take pressure off your team will help you a lot. Even if we are stall haters, it is something to keep in mind. Getting at least 1 or 2 walls might just win you games. On that same note, I do think that stall is so much worse because not only is it super duper easy to prep for, but it's really hard to get all the things you need to make a stall team work. And like, other playstyles, I think like balance and bulky offense are so good right now, and hyper offense is so shitty. Because hyper offense relies on you being able to get all the broken mons, and you can't do that in this season when there's 8 more people drafting than normal. But weirdly enough, on that same note, gimmick teams are super strong because no one's gonna fight you on a gimmick mon. No one wants to do that. So if you have the rain team and you're just, slamming your water on the face, and like, it's hard to stack water resistances. It's hard to get water absorb mons. Same with sun, same with terrain, psychic terrain especially, electric terrain especially. It's very hard to prep for those kinds of teams. I mean, I played the electric terrain last season, and I can say that it was very hard for my enemies to deal with me. And if you do the gimmick teams, this video is kind of pointless for you. You just play around your gimmick, but you need to make sure that you do full commit. You don't want to be like Tyler and Alex were last season with their half-assed rain team and half-assed psychic terrain team, and you're just kind of playing around nothing. Archaludon's so good, man. Anyways, lastly, I think I want to touch more on synergy and the importance of it, because making sure that your team is varied in what they do and the purpose that they serve is honestly one of the best things you can do for yourself as a drafter. Last season, I had that electric terrain team. And I really struggled with that team early on because I couldn't break through anything with a high special defense and assault vest. Because my main core was that Iron Moth and Iron Bundle, and those are, only special attackers. I can't do much else. Now, obviously, I adapted. I started using Iron Hands a lot more. That freed them up. But just because I was able to adapt doesn't mean that the team itself was well built. It just meant that you can kind of work around the flaws in your team, but I feel like that team kind of sucked overall, and it got exposed in the finals for all of its flaws. And for some, being varied in prep, being creative, I don't need to do that. I'll bring the same team every week. And it's not going to be an issue for you, and that's great for you, but for me personally it was. And it's so important for me to just make sure that you have that good mix of physical and special breakers. You have some setup sweepers to win games. You have some walls to sponge damage. You have some general support with the hazards and the hazard cleaning and the statuses and the phasers with the roar and the dragon tail and the whirlwind and the disruptors with the taunt and the encore and blase blase blah, Like, having more options to win only gives you more ways to win. And that means that your opponent has more things to prep for and concern themselves with. And again, I want to just touch on that finals. I urge you to look at that game. I urge you to look at how versatile and varied Quinn's team is, and then look at my team and how one-dimensional it is and stagnant it is. And then you watch the game and you see exactly how that affects the match at hand. And I think it really goes to show how good of a coach Quinn is, that he can balance out all these different ideas and philosophies and constantly build teams that follow those ideas and play some of the best mons I've seen from someone in this league. And I know that sounds like glaze, but his run that season was just that good. He earned the fuck out of that trophy. That being said, that's about all I have. That's my new draft philosophies going into the season. I will probably see you guys when we do the preseason power rankings. And, for those of us who will be in person, I will see you at the draft this Sunday. Let's have another great season of Pokemon. Thank you for 10 years of the Midwest Pokemon League. This was Pyson, coach of the Portland Trailblazers, signing off. Bye.